Hey there, how are you? I have a really odd question, a really unusual topic to talk about today. This one's going to be a little bit out there, so I'll ask you to bear with me. But basically, the question I want to ask and the subject I want to explore today is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? There's a debate and a discussion out there about whether or not this world that we live in is the real world, or if it's possible that all of this could be a computer-generated simulation.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo.
I know, it's crazy, it's out there. This question of basically, are we living in the real world, or are we living in the Matrix? I'll say this right up front. I get that this is way into the realm of the fantastic and signs of the overactive imaginations of sci-fi geeks and nerds. But hear me out, because we've reached a point in this conversation where actual scientists, theoretical physicists, are getting into this subject. The idea is that the world we live in right here, the world that we can see and touch and taste and smell, is not real. Okay, why don't we get to a quiet spot and dig into the details of what I'm talking about. Some of the evidence that would call into question whether or not reality is actually reality. But I don't want to try to do that while I'm driving. Okay, so what are we actually talking about here? We're talking about how we perceive the world around us. We have our basic senses, right? Sight, touch, hearing, taste, and smell. And depending on who you talk to or what you believe, some people are able to perceive things in the world around them. Call that empathy, call that intuition, whatever. But let's stick to scientific facts for a second here. First off, you go to sight. Our ability to see the things around us is photons, right? Light particles that are emitted by the sun or emitted by these electrical light fixtures, sending photons out that bounce on everything and eventually bounce back into our eyes. Our eyes take those photons somewhere in the nerves to our brain. We translate those particles into information. Our brain perceives shapes and light and dark, and we can see the world around us. But at the same time, we already know scientifically that things such as hallucinations exist. People can see things that are not actually there. Those aren't being put into your brain to perceive by photons coming into your eyes. They are manifestations of other information, probably within our own brain, but we are perceiving it as a real thing, the same way our eyes perceive everything else. So who's to say that these images that our eyes are perceiving are not being put there by some other source? Okay? Let's go a little deeper down the rabbit hole. What about touch? Okay? I pick up this phone. I feel it. I can tactile sense it through the nerve endings, through my skin and my fingers. I can put it up against my face, and the nerves in my face perceive that this object is here. I feel the shape when I run my hands around it. To me, it's a real thing. Once again, electrical signals that are being put out by the nerves in our fingertips, in our skin, anywhere on our bodies that we feel touch, sends an electrical signal to our brain, which tells us, yes, here is a real thing. There are documented examples during brain surgery where, as doctors are poking around in there in the gray matter, they're able to induce the sensation of feeling something that's not there. Or I'll do you one better. Talk about folks that have unfortunately lost a limb, lost a leg, lost a hand, lost an arm in some accident. There is a documented phenomenon of the ghost limb where this individual's brain continues to insist that it can feel the nerve endings of an appendage that's no longer there. So when you get right down to it, sight, touch, smell, taste, hearing, this is information that's being fed into our brain that we perceive as the real world around us. And as technology in our world advances, it becomes more and more possible to fool the brain by providing information that the brain interprets as real. Think about some of the weird phenomena that people experience in our world. Deja vus, dream premonitions, past life memories. Remember I mentioned a while ago those theoretical physicists who are getting involved in the conversation. Right now there's a couple of them that have published articles basically saying it's impossible, that technology to computerize a real world does not exist right now, and it could not exist. That even our best computing technology would not be able to handle the amount of information it would have to store and retrieve and process in order to feed false signals to our brain. In other words, I don't care how many terabytes of space your hard drive has, you're never going to be able to encode enough information to even simulate one human person. That's the whole point. If we are living in some kind of computer fantasy, it's not of this world. Take religious implications. You have billions of people on this planet that believe in higher beings, in deities, in gods, in otherworldly realms of existence. What is to say that the reality we live in is not fed to us by another plane of existence? By the way, we're tripping into the territory of what I consider agnosticism. That would be me. So I apologize. I don't mean to offend anybody of religious faith. I'm just telling you how I see it. So the argument could be made that this existence, if it was created by some deity somewhere else, would that not account for the fact that this can't be a real world? That we were endowed with this consciousness, with this sentience, to be self-aware and to know the world around us. And that brings me to my final point, the nature of human consciousness. So far, as we've studied this planet around us and we've studied the world at large, we have yet to find another species that is able to think the way we are. We have the most evolved brain on the planet, and as far as we know, there's never been anything here before quite like us that can think and perceive and have self-determination and self-awareness. That's at least our assumption, and that's a conversation for a whole nother video. But when you get right down to it, no matter how advanced our modern technology is, no matter how far our medical knowledge has come, we still cannot account for what creates human consciousness. And we know that there's electricity going around all parts of our brain. We've been able to measure by observation what areas of the brain light up like a Christmas tree when we do certain things. We still don't know jack squat. We do not understand why the human brain dreams, simulations that take place while we sleep. Well, if our eyes are closed and our bodies are not conscious, how can we be perceiving images and sounds and feelings and thoughts when we're not interacting with this supposed real world? The argument could be made that this crude matter, as Yoda said, is not who and what we really are, that luminous beings are we, and that clearly somewhere within this shell there is a pilot program that is providing awareness and consciousness. I tell you, this is a pretty deep rabbit hole once you go down it. But I think I've gone on long enough, so it's time for me to ask you what you think. Am I completely off the reservation here and pie in the sky, living in the clouds sci-fi fantasy? Or are we onto something here? Is there a chance that what we see and perceive around us may not actually be real? That somewhere in another plane of existence is where our consciousness comes from, and all of this is just a simulation set up to test us, to see how we perform, and to see if we're worthy of what comes afterwards. I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comments. Tell me what you think, and if you've ever questioned whether or not the real world around you is really real. If you think I did a good job on the video, thank you. I'd appreciate if you could hit that like button, maybe consider subscribing, come along and have more of these conversations with me on the channel. I appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to walk through this conversation with me today. But for now, I suppose I should get back out there to the real world and finish my day. As always, my friends, I want to thank you so much for watching, and out there, I'll see you on the road. In the real world.